But the general comic book audience, the comic book fan audience that goes to these movies, I think, yeah, I mean, you definitely see that as a factor. If something is too far from what they like, they're going to be like, well, wouldn't you like this in your comics? Sometimes people need to understand that it's not a comic. You know, it's a movie for a reason.
What is up? And you are watching Beside the Point here on Nerdy Blurb TV. Today we have a really awesome discussion to talk about today with my boy DarkKnightNation, who's been on the show before. We're going to be talking about comic books and the source material that comes with them in the script of movies. Is it affecting Hollywood? Is it affecting audiences' perception? Let's check it out. Stay with us. Presented by None of This Really Matters, this is Beside the Point here on Nerdy Blurb TV, and I am here with DarkKnightNation, who is a fellow YouTuber who talks about comic books, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Dark Knight, how are you today?
I'm doing all right, man. You know, it's a little bit chilly out here, but I'm still kicking. Thanks again for having me on.
Absolutely. Where are you calling from? Let's let people, if you want to share that.
I am calling in from the East Coast, good old New England, in the grand old boring state of Connecticut. Why do you think I read comic books so much? There's nothing else to do around here.
See, and I'm in probably the most boring part of the West Coast, all the way over in Utah. So that's why I read comic books and watch movies, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So again, dude, thanks so much for tuning in again. Really appreciated you coming onto our show a few months ago, but also you having me on your channel. It's really cool to be able to work with you. Appreciate it.
Oh, dude, it's always a blast. You know, the two guys who come from the most boring states on the planet. We gotta help each other out. You know, get the ball moving. So
absolutely,
thanks for having me as always.
Absolutely, man, absolutely. So tell us just a little bit about your channel, and because if some people haven't seen it, we want them to know what you're all about and go and check you out. So tell us a little bit.
Well, yeah, thanks for the opportunity, man. So I run the channel DarkKnightNation. So really what I like to do are story dissections, character analysis, and really break down the things that you and I love about comic books, right? Why do we like these things? What about these things makes them so good? And I really try to take a little bit more of an objective approach to these things and figure out why comic books should be kind of considered that upper echelon of literary medium, right? We get the Watchmens and the Sandmans and so on and so forth. And I want to hold comic books to the same standard that pundits would hold film or novels or any other form of storytelling, and that's really what I try to do. Not to mention we like to go over all of the different adaptations, including movies, television, so on and so forth, that these characters have kind of been elevated into. And sometimes I just like to talk about why I like picture books. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist of what we do over on DarkKnightNation.
Dude, nice. And if you have not checked out his channel, please go and do that, because if you're into comic books and just like actual real content when it comes to that genre and medium of storytelling, DarkKnightNation does it best. And it's really cool because he does have other people that come onto his channel, and as of today, very recently, we are going to be having a debate about comic books that I'm super excited about. If you're watching this after that actually drops on Thursday, March 14th, go back and check it out on his channel, where we actually discuss live about what should be better, graphic novel or trade paperbacks or pull lists in the comic book community. Tune in on March 14th. And I mean, are you ready for that, brother?
Oh, dude, I'm ready. I was born ready. This as soon as we started talking about making this happen, I knew that I was going to come out freaking swinging, man. So yeah, definitely if you guys are watching this beforehand, March 14th, I think it's 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, 6:30 Mountain Standard Time. Come by, slide through. The audience will decide who wins, of course, because if one of us did, it'd be like the Game of Thrones up in here. So come check that out for sure. It'll be a blast per usual.
And I'm super looking forward to it. Those of you who have not checked out Dark Knight's channel yet, go and do that, because he talks about great stuff, and we're going to continue to talk about that kind of stuff right here today, because with picture books, with comic books, I feel like in the community nowadays, there's been a lot of backlash with it by saying that it shouldn't be taken seriously or not, and yet we have this huge following of films and huge productions of TV shows and streaming services that are specifically based on comic books. And I don't understand why it's a medium that people don't necessarily take seriously. I'm glad that you cover that kind of stuff over at your channel, but let's talk about that a little bit. So there's a lot of movies that have been coming out a lot lately. In fact, it's the new fad, it's the new thing for the last decade, for it to be a movie about superheroes or anything based on comic books. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's kind of crazy, right? Because the whole premise of like comic books as a sequential art form is so that you can get these big bombastic movies without spending hundreds of millions of dollars, right? You can have these explosions and alien races fighting one another for whatever, energy blasts running across the panel or your perspective of the camera, and it costs, nickels and dimes. I think the thing that really just takes to film is that comic books, especially superhero comic books, being as cinematic as they are, were kind of a poor man's way to get cinema, right? It was sequential. You get frame by frame, so to speak, of all the major tipping points of the scene. And I mean, it just draws to it. The mass movie going audience in the world wants something fun, high octane, but also emotional. And oftentimes that's what these comic books can convey. I mean, you look at a really, really large majority of stuff that's going to television, whether it be streaming service or syndicated television and film, a lot of it are originally comic book properties. Like, comic book IPs are selling like hotcakes nowadays, and I think that it's just telling of what the medium is and what it's capable of, and transcending, its original format.
And I think also, like, just IPs in general, it goes further than film. I mean, you look at Spider-Man. Spider-Man is the most purchased and the most mass-produced IP property when it comes to toys and comic books, as well as apparel as well. And so that's where Spider-Man makes most of its money is through merchandise and all of that. And so for people like, and this isn't necessarily too recently, but it is still like a sore subject and a stupid one that some people say that they shouldn't be taken seriously, like Bill Maher, who recently kind of slandered the name of comic books and Stan Lee and all of that kind of stuff by saying that not only is it juvenile, but it shouldn't be considered as literature. I'm not going to argue with somebody who differs with me, but like, I feel like the proof is definitely against anybody who says that, because of all of these intellectual properties that people want.
Listen, man, guys like Bill Maher say stuff like that to get more airtime. He is a D-list celebrity with not a lot to him, and you obviously, you capitalize on controversy. And that, for me personally, that's why I haven't really commented on it on my channel. I haven't commented on it on any of my social media. The guy's a jackass. Let's just put that out there. And I'm not going to give him any credence by screaming over it, because that's what he wants, right? Exactly. That's how he gets his name out there. And whether or not he's stupid enough to believe what he's saying is something totally different. But I'm not going to give the guy any credence by talking much about it, just because, obviously, again, people like me who are passionate about the genre, about the creators, and about these stories that are being told are the ones that are going to blow back at him, and rightfully so. But again, that's giving him what he wants, and I refuse to do that.
And I appreciate that, because honestly, I think it's something people should probably know, the ignorance that is out there, but also, like, just enjoy what you want to enjoy, really. And that's what we do. And to skip over a controversial topic like that commentator, I would say that, like, mainly kind of like what I was saying earlier, is that people definitely want this. People are definitely getting this. And I just want to know if you, as a fan of comic books, if they're being well represented in the storytelling medium of film. And that's mainly kind of like what we wanted to talk about today, and see if the source material really is important to the actual film itself or anything like that. How do you feel like studios are doing so far?
Well, I mean, this modern age of comic book films, certainly I think they're doing very well. Earlier attempts, maybe not so much. They're just kind of trying to get their feet on the ground so that they can run with it. Marvel, obviously, right now, 21 movies in, are absolutely killing it for the most part. You know that if in the last 5 years or so, if your worst movie, in my opinion, is Ant-Man and the Wasp, that's pretty damn good if that's your worst movie, right? If totally your worst agree. Movie is in the last 5 years was all right, that's great. You're really doing it. Obviously, DC has kind of had a problem here and there, but it seems like, again, knock on wood, that they're on an upward trend, with these stories. But I think Marvel, especially, has done a great job at realizing when you can have the interplay between the original source material and the film, and when you need to do something that is strictly film-oriented, right? Like when you need to take that source material and adapt it so that it works better for film, because there's a reason that comic books are on a page and used as sequential art on panels, and film are, hundreds of thousands of millions of frames, in a single motion picture. And that's because they're two totally different things. One of the issues I think with a lot of comic book fans is some of them expect it to be exact, right? Like some people expect to see the exact same thing on film, and while sometimes it works, sometimes it does work where you can almost pretty much adapt the comic book frame by frame, word by word, and it works out, but other times it doesn't. And I can't really get mad at somebody who is adapting. Again, let's look at the word adapting, not mimicking,
right,
not imitating, adapting a comic book into a movie. Is you're taking it and you're putting it in movie format. And of course, there's a whole other factors that go into it, but on top of that, being that the people who are making these movies are creatives. They want to do their story while paying respect to the comics, right? And I think just going back to what I consider to be the OG comic book film, and that's Batman 1989. That movie is so beyond beloved within the film community and the comic book community because it's able to embrace the comic book wacky, zany universe that they're trying to play in, courtesy of Tim Burton, and put it into film. And it's great. I wasn't born in '89. I'm a wee lad, but I hear all these stories about how literally everybody was freaking out that a Batman movie was made and that it was good and that people from all different walks of life were enjoying it. And I think that movie really just serves as a catalyst for the society and the pop cultural landscape that we live in today.
I am a little bit older than you. So I do remember it coming out. I do remember watching it. I do remember growing up with Batman, Tim Burton's Batman. And it had its time and it had its place. And you are absolutely right on so many points. And I'm going to reiterate that by saying this. And I don't often admit this. And it's because I'm older. But when Heath Ledger was coming out, because we haven't had a Batman movie come out since Tim Burton's. There was decades in between. There was a lot, and then Nolan comes out with Batman Begins. I thoroughly enjoyed that movie, and then when I heard that they were making the next bad guy Joker, I was not on board, and I was not cool with Heath Ledger with being the Joker because I thought there's no way you can replace the Jack Nicholson You can't replace that. Not to mention, it's also similar to the comic books. Like everything that was being portrayed in the trailers or any of that kind of stuff with Heath Ledger, I just thought this is not what it's supposed to be in comic books. And then I saw the movie, and I was extremely proven wrong because he was amazing in it, and it kind of showed me that these properties are meant to be experimented with. And I think that's something that I can really appreciate in comic books as a medium, because they take these timeless characters like Batman and adjust them to tell different stories. You and I have had this conversation before on one of our videos, and I think it was on my channel, where it's just that they use these characters to tell different stories for different people or for different situations through the characters that we're familiar with. And so that means change is definitely inevitable. And I guess the real question that I have for you is that if you ever see, especially nowadays, if you are familiar with a property, if there was to be another Batman movie and it was just so far from the source material that you love, and it just changed too much, would it affect your judgment of the film afterwards?
I think it all depends, right? Like if it's something that I can look at and understand and find something likable about it, maybe not, right? I mean, if you really look at Christopher Nolan's Batman films, they are not kind of centrically Batman films. They're crime thrillers with Batman. And oftentimes, I have to say that those are the movies that end up being the biggest, most transcendental comic book films of all time. Same with Logan. Logan was a neo-Western with Wolverine in it, and the characters that we know and love. And that's kind of the glorious thing about this, right, is that a lot of people have this misconception that comic books are a genre. Comic books are a medium that you're adapting. You know what I'm saying? And the movies that really break apart from that really centralized understanding of what that is, and take those characters and the universes and the storylines and turn them into something kind of higher than that, those are the ones that knock me out of my socks. You know, like Logan, what was it, 2017 that movie came out? Easily the best movie of the year. I was fuming that it didn't get a nomination for Best Picture, because I thought it was absolutely phenomenal, and it might be the best movie I've seen in, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And it's because it's not a comic book storyline, really. You're taking elements from the universe, and you're taking elements of this character, and you're crafting a cinematic neo-Western story with it. And it works, right? Like, you can do that without disrespecting the universe of the characters. So, like, my long-winded way of getting around to answering the question is, as long as the characters and the universe are done justice, change what you have to change. As long as there's a reason for it, you know, as a comic book fan, and as much as I always try to be as objective as possible, there will always be a part of me that will look at something if I don't think it works and say, well, you have something that works over here in the comic book, why didn't you use it? That's the only thing I could possibly think or imagine myself kind of getting at. Like, if I personally don't like a choice that was made and think that what's already there, you know, would be a better job. Like, for example, the Killing Joke animated film.
Yeah.
A lot of problems with the little introductory piece. I actually also had a lot of problems with the actual film itself. But in terms of the writing, they unnecessarily took out some of the most iconic dialogue exchange that the Joker's ever had in the history of the medium of comic books. And I was so excited going into this to hear Mark Hamill read those lines of dialogue so that I could die a happy nerd. And he didn't. Frankly, the lines that were written and delivered were so below subpar to what was written on the original comic book page. I'm sitting here fuming, thinking to myself, this sucked. You had something great over here that you could literally copy without worrying about any legal issues, and you didn't use it. And I think for me, those would be the types of problems that I might have, is if a liberty is taken and I don't think it's good, suddenly I'm going to be like, well, you have an answer right here. Why didn't you use it? But the general comic book audience, the comic book fan audience that goes to these movies, I think, yeah, I mean, you definitely see that as a factor. If something is too far from what they like, they're going to be like, well, wouldn't you like this in your comics? Sometimes people need to understand that it's not a comic. You know, it's a movie for a reason.
And I completely agree with that. And there are so many reasons. There are so many things that you said that I freaking agree with. Like Logan is, yeah, the greatest. In my opinion, one of the greatest comic book movies to ever come out. The end of story. And I'm going to just leave that there. Moving on.
No question.
The Killing Joke is actually an interesting one because, yeah, there were a lot of things, especially with Barbara and freaking Batman. I don't understand that kind of stuff. Yeah, that was that kind of ruined it for me as well. Dialogue, you are right. Now that I think of it, it's been a while since I've seen it. Now that I think about it, they did change a lot of it. And I would say that's pretty drastic, especially if you know your fans are going to be expecting that kind of stuff. And yeah, the movie didn't land with me, but it is pretty iconic, which is so funny to me because I don't know if you've ever heard Alan Moore talk on that comic book, but he himself doesn't find it to be the most, like, he finds it to be kind of mediocre in other things that he has wrote, and which is kind of weird for me.
Yeah.
It's strange.
The Killing Joke was literally just for him to fulfill a contract. Yeah, it was that last little bit just to get done with it. So that's kind of why maybe some creators, some filmmakers, some writers have that kind of outlook by saying we're just here to film a Captain Marvel movie and throw it out before Endgame gets in there. And that was one that I wanted to talk about because, one, it is the most recent film that we have as of today, and it is also one that has changed a lot from its own source material. And those who haven't seen the movie, those who are not familiar with the history or the source material or any of that, some of that may be spoiled for you. If you'd like to skip to the next topic, you can. But I don't think too many things should be something to lose sleep over, because what they did was pretty dramatic, and yet it still worked for me. And I thought we'd talk a little bit about dramatic changes in that film. I know you're a Batman guy. I know you're not a fan of Captain Marvel or whatever, which is fine. But changing a gender is kind of like a big one, and it's one that so many people had a problem with. And those who are not familiar with what I'm talking about, Captain Marvel, the woman in the film, is actually in the source material a man. And with all the controversy that surrounds that film coming out with feminism and all of that kind of stuff I could care less about because I just want a good film, I think may have fueled that. What are your thoughts on writers changing source material when it comes to something dramatic such as that? I mean, I really think it's all in how it's handled, right? I mean, you look at Doctor Strange and you have who ended up playing what was the character's name? Jesus, I am blanking. In Doctor Strange, the Master.
Yes. Tilda Swinton played her.
Yeah, I forget the character's name. I'm sorry. Bash me, call me not a comic book fan, whatever you got to do. Tilda Swinton ends up playing him, and I think she carried the role really well, and I think it's also in how it also depends on whether or not those changes are directly tied to something in the comic book, right? So, for example, you look at Batman, right? Let's use my guy. If you were to cast a non-white actor, it would not make sense, right? Because the Wayne family is a family that is historically wealthy and has had a historically wealthy foothold in the United States for centuries. Now, if you look at the shitty history of the United States with slavery and discrimination, so on and so forth, that would be nearly impossible for the Waynes to not be Caucasian. It doesn't make sense. So if you were to change Bruce Wayne's ethnicity, you know, there's a possibility that if you get the right actor doing it, I might not care. But 9 times out of 10, I'm going to look at you and say, no, that doesn't make sense with the character. Whereas Superman, you could actually change the race of the character or the ethnicity of the character. Because who's to say Kryptonians are white, right? Biologically, it would make sense if Superman were darker skinned because he'd be able to absorb the yellow sunlight radiation or sunlight radiation in general better than somebody without the melatonin.
That's right.
So you could make that change with Superman because his Caucasian, his whiteness doesn't have as much to do with his character. Whereas with Batman, if you look at it sociologically and the standpoint of the character and his legacy, his family, it wouldn't make sense. Marvel, I thought it was fine. In you know, it helped to kind of forward that subtle kind of feminist thematic that the creators were trying to push in there, which I personally didn't think was overdone. I thought it was, you know, fairly subtle. They didn't shove it down my throat. There were those little flashback scenes, you know, where Carol remembers her time in the military, being oppressed by a couple of men, and, you know, that motorbike scene. But, you know, changing Marvel to a woman didn't really do a lot of damage, I don't think, to the story, to the character, to the legacy. So I was fine with it. You do have other situations where it doesn't quite work, you know, like the Fantastic Four, the most recent iteration directed by Josh Trank. The family, they really, I felt like in order to get Michael B. Jordan in there, they really messed with the family dynamic between him and Sue Storm and the father, and like it feels inauthentic, right? Like the Fantastic Four is supposed to be Marvel's first family, and it all kind of stems from the 60s and this old world American superpower idealism. And if you were to play with the races of the cast or the genders of the cast, it wouldn't really work, right? Like there's a certain dynamic that's being set up here. Whereas with Marvel, to my knowledge, not being a huge Captain Marvel Carol Danvers fan, but I have some background knowledge on the character in terms of reading, making Marvel a woman doesn't really impact or do any wrong to the character or the universe. And they use it to get one of their major points across, albeit subtly. So in those types of situations, I don't really mind.
And I think the reason why it was such a huge deal is because of the political social justice that has been going around these past couple years, which have been super toxic, and I can't really freaking stand it anymore. Yeah. But like, having put that all aside, I think that in itself messed with a lot of people. But I do know people who do have issues with that, and that I do know some people that could say, yeah, that's fine, whatever. But like, what if they changed like Thor into a woman? And my answer to any of that kind of stuff is, well, they kind of already did in the comic books. But like,
they did.
and it's fine. I'd be fine with a female Thor or whatever. But the thing is that it worked here because, first off, nobody knows Captain Marvel. Nobody cared about Captain Marvel. Even I, who I feel like a lot of people think that I'm a huge Captain Marvel fanboy, which I'm not. I just wanted something new in the MCU because it's getting boring. But like the thing is that it was so subtle enough to change a gender that nobody else would have known except for OG comic book readers. And I just don't think that really matters, because honestly, when you talked about Doctor Strange and her being the supreme sorcerer, I had no idea, because I don't read Doctor Strange, and I was fine with Tilda Swinton being the supreme not intelligence, the supreme sorcerer or sorcerer supreme. It's just, there are things that I think writers look at and say, this is an opportunity, let's change it up to make people, not whether you want to say included or be represented here. I think it's a bigger opportunity for more people to get into comic books and comic book movies.
Right. And you know, for me, at the end of the day, when changes like that are made, the first thing I think about is did they make the right casting choice? Did the actor or actress do a good job portraying the character? And was the character well written to the point where they are independent and they are kind of respectful to the source material? I may have my little gripes about changing some things that just don't make sense canonically or sociologically with a character. But at the end of the day, the biggest question I'm going to ask is, did they make the right casting choice, and was the character written well? That is the biggest thing, because you know what? Again, this isn't the comic books, it's a movie. And at the end of the day, if the creative team feels like they need to take a liberty to make a better film, so be it. Just do it well. That's all I'm asking for. Just do it well.
I agree.
You know, like if you got to make Idris Elba my Batman, you bet I'm going to watch that movie. And you bet I'm probably going to enjoy it. And you know that at the end of the movie, I'll probably still have that little sociological and historical gripe with the casting. But at the end of the day, if Idris Elba does what Idris Elba does and knocks out a freaking performance as my favorite character in all of fiction, you better forget that detail is not going to be something I'm going to be thinking about for a couple months. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, if the casting is good and the character is well written, that's what matters. That's what matters most. You know what I mean? So I think it was fine. Captain Marvel did a fine job with it. It helped to further, I don't want to say the agenda because it makes it sound political. It helped to further kind of the intention of that little underlying feminism thematic. And frankly, I know a lot of people were up in arms about them. Like the word feminism send chills down people's spine, right?
It's a trigger word.
But if you really look at the original definition and the origins of the feminism movement, it's to provide equality for all, right? Because women at the time were one of the biggest groups discriminated in America, right? Women make up half, I think, if not more now, more than half of the population of the world. And so it was finding a balance of equality. Now, just like any other organization of people, it can be led into extremes, right? Christianity has, and that's the biggest religion in the world. Why don't we look at Christianity? Somebody says, we're making a movie about Jesus. Why isn't anybody freaking out? And it's all because of the social perspective. They did a good job with it. You know, feminism doesn't have to be a bad word. And that's, again, like, I will go all out and open and say, like, I'm a conservative, right? So you would think me to be saying the other thing. They did a good job at not forcing it down my throat and providing a logistical reason to include those feminism thematics, right? It makes sense, especially being Marvel's first real female-led character. I don't want to hear the Scarlett Johanssons. I don't want to hear the Evangeline Lillys. This was the first female lead in a Marvel film, and they did a fine job, and they had something they wanted to say about the real world. And again, as long as you don't shove it down my throat and you do it kind of eloquently with finesse, I'm cool with it. I'm down. So in that respect, to all the people that are, you know, pissed off about feminism in Captain Marvel, gut check yourself, man. Think about it. Think before you speak. That's all I gotta say.
No, that is well said. Not only so, because I think it clouds people's judgment from the get-go.
Yeah.
When all of the, with Brie Larson talking this and talking that, this topic has turned into a political one, which is fine, because that is a lot of what I think nowadays things are being changed because of source material doesn't match the ideas of today or anything like that, and that's fine, and we covered that. But like, let's talk about let's step aside from political stuff. I agree with you so much on all of that, but I think also I would do it injustice to people watching this and saying, yeah, but there's so much more that was changed in Captain Marvel. And again, those who have not seen the movie, I would hate to spoil it for you, so go ahead and skip if you'd like. But the whole main premise that everyone was looking forward to, even myself included, I've even made videos about it, was the huge twist in the movie that the Skrulls are the bad guys. And it turned out that they were characters that we want to sympathize with and make them and humanize them, for lack of a better word, and make them be victims as well as just let's take their side. And whether or not I thought that was the bad choice to do for potential future movies, because the Skrulls could have been somebody that they fight throughout the whole rest of the universe, it really worked for me because I wasn't expecting it. It was new, and they did it pretty well. And so when it comes to changes in source material that are that drastic, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the thing is it's not as drastic, you know. They're like, obviously Secret Invasion was a big comic book storyline involving the Skrulls, and that's where they get a lot of their public image. But like currently at Marvel, there is a mini-series regarding a Skrull family that's just kind of trying to live a normal life on Earth.
I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, and so one of the things too is that people don't identify. I feel like the general movie-going audience is going to follow that plot, that narrative, you know, with the shift in perspective, realizing that, spoiler, here's your chance to mute me out now. The Kree are the villains, and the Skrulls are an innocent refugee race just trying to find safety, a home. The thing is that people probably generally on a very basal level find that to be an all right narrative to follow. But at the end of the day, because nobody said anything overtly political, the general movie-going audience doesn't realize how political that plot is. That plot is so political, but it's because the general movie-going audience doesn't hear a word as overt like feminism, that they don't care. That like words like that, like people let those things cloud their judgment. Like you do realize that the Skrulls being falsely accused of something is a metaphor for so many different historical events regarding racism throughout the world. It's not even funny.
It could even be nowadays with immigration and all that kind of stuff.
Dude, one of the allegories I found was, and again, conservative, Reagan's war on drugs.
Yo.
Right? Like he painted a picture of these impoverished, you know, black people who were living in low opportune areas and criminalized them. And and knowing that these were the broad amount of people that were not going to be voting for him in the upcoming election, right? It was not going to be impoverished black people that were voting for Reagan. Let's be real. Let's be honest. I love Reagan as a president. But this is one of the biggest issues that I found in his administration, and that's persistent throughout this, right? They wanted to kind of make the words and the advocation of this group of people illegitimate. So what do? You paint a target on their back. You make them kind of unviable as a source of information. What did the Kree do to the Skrulls in this movie? They made them unviable. They made them, you know, publicly into a group of liars, into murderers, into kind of conquerors. But it wasn't, in fact, the case. And again, that's just one small example. There are a number of instances throughout U.S. history and world history that's happened. But because nobody says a word like feminism or racism, people don't freak out. And so, you know, for anybody watching this, I invite you to think about that instead of blasting me in the face and screaming at me, because I pointed out the fact that you only get mad when you associate certain words with something else. You know what I mean? People aren't freaking out about the plot. But as soon as someone like me brings this up and includes the fact that this has historical precedent, it is in fact somewhat politically charged. That's when people freak out, because of the notion of it being politically charged. But if I didn't say that, the general person watching this video would have been like, oh, like, this is cool. Like, that was an awesome little twist there. I enjoyed that. The minute I bring something like that in, people freak out. And so, like I invite people to read comic books more critically, absorb your media more critically. Understand what you're watching, what you're bringing into your head before you freak out about it. And we're all susceptible to that, right? Like, sometimes I'll read stuff on Twitter or I'll read stuff on social media and I'll want to just like snap. I'll just want to, like, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about, this, that, and the other thing. And then I stop myself and I'm like, wait a minute. And I encourage people to do the same, because we're human, it happens. But at the end of the day, really think about what you're doing. I cannot think of a single piece of storytelling that does not have an agenda that doesn't exist in the real world. So look at that, people. Like, really, really think about that. Comic book movies are no exception. Comic books historically were used as a way to really push these big humanitarian messages, right? And whether or not it's and it goes beyond that, humanitarian, political. I mean, geez, comic books were huge wartime propaganda pieces in the 40s. Huge. There are pictures of Batman punching Hitler. So I just encourage people to think about that. My long-winded response.
No, and it's good, because I feel like people need to understand what you do over at your channel. Those of you who are joining us right now because the spoilers are over, or those who got sick of us and just fast forward, Dark Knight Nation covers freaking awesome stuff. It thinks outside the box and thinks inwardly about the medium that is comic books. And I think we could all learn from what he talks about over at his channel, as well as here too, because comic books can be taken seriously if you have that outlook by saying, how can this apply to me and in my life? And before we wrap things up, I just want to kind of talk about the source material in film in general. Is this something that you think will be a common trend? Do you think we're going to see more movies change their predecessor source material dramatically like that? We do have a lot of things coming up. We do have the Joker coming out in this year in October, actually, and Wonder Woman. So many things, and with an ever-changing society, do you think that we should be expecting more source material changes?
100%. 100%. I mean, now I think people are starting to look at comic books in what has really spawned from it, right? The universes, the characters, the stories, the worlds. And they're realizing that these are excellent lenses for creativity, to kind of channel your creativity through. And that's why you see a lot of these big companies, production companies and so on and so forth, picking up these intellectual properties that used to be worth absolutely nothing and are going to be turning into multi-million-dollar movies, even billion-dollar movies. I'm glad you brought up the Joker, the Todd Phillips Joker movie, because that's going to be nothing like a comic book. I can guarantee you that. That is going to be nothing like the comic book. And you know what? I'm totally okay with that, because they are not marketing this movie like it's going to be like my comic books. They are using the characters in the universe, again, as a lens to tell the story they want to tell. And they're not selling it to me like this is going to be, the Killing Joke by Alan Moore. They're not selling this to me like it's going to be, The Man Who Laughs by Ed Brubaker. It is something entirely different. We are using the characters and likenesses and maybe some little throwbacks to the universe in this film. And at the end of the day, the director and the writers and the crew and the cast are going to be creating something that is entirely their own. A lot of it also like that depends on the context, right? Like if you are building a big movie universe, yeah, maybe I will expect you to stay a little bit more strictly to the source material, right? Like the MCU. If I don't know. Say you pulled a secret empire and you told me that Cap was actually a Nazi the whole time. I'd probably be like, well, I don't know if I can swear, but I'd be like, well, what the F, man? Like, you know what I mean? So it's just looking at the context and what they're really marketing to you, right? Because at the end of the day, all you can expect from a movie before you see it is what you see through the marketing.
Right. And I think that's really fitting to leave it off with you saying that Logan was one of the greatest comic book superhero movies that we've had in a long time.
So good.
And the Joker could be that because it's doing exactly what Logan did. I mean, there are old man Logan comic books, and from what I hear, they're great, but the Hulk is in it, and it never said that this is going to be when Hulk and Wolverine meet or anything like that. That probably would have sold a lot of tickets at the movie theater.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that. They focused on how dark and how a life can turn on a drop of a hat, and it was great.
Right.
And I hope that that's what we get in the Joker. And it's cool too because we apart from the Killing Joke and maybe zero a year, I think we don't really have very much source material on the Joker and his origin. And so it's kind of like it's an open book almost. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of that.
Well, no, those are the two biggest quote unquote in continuity, or what people perceive to be in continuity origins for the Joker, for sure. I'd say even with Zero Year being the most recent, pretty much everybody takes the Killing Joke at its core. Video games, adaptations, so on and so forth. And it's funny because even when the Joker tells that story, if you've read The Killing Joke, he says that maybe that wasn't true. I don't remember.
Right.
It's like, that's entirely probable that the Joker just led you around in a string. You know what I mean? Like he just led you around to tell this story. But obviously, myself included, took that origin for what it was. So, I mean, you're gonna be able to do so much. You know, I feel like I've seen one movie with directed by Todd Phillips. I don't think I've seen anything with Joaquin Phoenix in it, but from what I understand, the guy is one of the best actors on the face of the planet. So, like, I don't doubt the creative team's ability to make a good film. Logan, again, like you were saying, just going into that, one of the big grabs of the comic book storyline was, spoilers, Wolverine tears the Hulk apart. And for me, the biggest pull to this movie was the fact that, as a grown man, I almost cried my ass off in the theater. For me, it was the interpersonal and intercharacter dynamics, right? It was the relationship between Logan and Laura, and the relationship between Logan and Professor Xavier that really elevate that movie and make me love it as much as I do. Like, I think in that movie I almost cried twice. Twice! That's never happened to me, and I will unadulteratedly tell the truth. When Logan died and Laura turns over the cross to make an X, you better bet it was like still face, tears rolling down. Like, I lost it, man. That movie, I have not reacted to any movie like that ever in my life. And a comic book movie was able to do that. And it was not a comic book storyline. It wasn't a comic book storyline. They took the character, they made it, it did feel like Logan. It did feel like parts of Logan, Wolverine from the comic book. And you brought him in and you told a different story with him, and it worked. It worked so well. My favorite movie the last 5 years. So, you know, kind of tying back into the original closing topic, yes, we will see a lot of diverging from the original source material. And no, I'm not 100% against it, as long as it's done well. You know, and again, a lot of people can point at me and say, well, what's well to you may not be well to me. You know, again, I try as best as I can to separate what I think is objectively good and what I like, right? And one of my biggest examples for those of you that have read Batman Earth 1, I don't personally like that story that much. I don't love it. I think it's fine, but I think if you look at the writing and you look at the artistic vision, the book is excellent. The book is very well done. I think it is very, very well done, and it's very clear that the writer and artist are absolute masters of their craft. And I think if I gave it an objective score, it would be incredibly high. Very, very high. I personally don't love the story. I don't love what was done with the character. So for me, that's what I attempt. You know, it might not be accomplished every single time. I attempt to make that differentiation whenever I absorb any type of media. So I'm going to try to do that as, you know, these studios continue to take these creative liberties. But, you know, people are going to react to it. And you know what? At the end of the day, it's going to drum up, you know, some buzz is better than no buzz. And it doesn't matter what it is as long as it's buzz. So no matter what, you know, people might freak out about it. I might freak out about it. But at the end of the day, it's going to service the movie and it's going to service the creative project because it's getting its name out there on screens. It's getting articles written about it. It's getting publicity. So, you know, I think at the end of the day, it's not a terrible thing. I think that a lot of the best adaptations make that choice to stray away from the source, but respect it. And that's all that I ask for as a comic book fans. Other comic book fans will ask different, but for me, that's all that I'm looking for.
And I definitely agree with you on so many different points because the way I see it is very simple for me. Is that if you make something that is different and has a different view from the source material, then you just made two things that I can enjoy in two different ways. I can enjoy the book, I can enjoy the comic book, I can enjoy the actual historic event. Whatever the medium and story that is being told here is that I have more of what I like and a different perspective because the whole point of comic books, and again, this is what you say a lot on your channel and try to convey, is that it should be thought about and it should be digested and it should be applied to your own life. And everybody lives a different life. So to have a different perspective, whether that means changing anything or not, I think is a good thing. So, I mean, to wrap it all up, I think seriously, I've like those of you who are watching this who demand their comic book movies to be exactly as the source material is written. That is you. That is great. Leave your comments down below. Tell us what you agree with or disagree with. We'd love to hear from you. Definitely go and check out Dark Knight Nation's channel. He is the bomb when it comes to this medium, and he does great stuff on YouTube. Go check him out. Thank you so much, dude, for coming on and just shooting the breeze, bro. It's always a fun time because the funnest part about all of this is that we just roll the camera and then we talk, and I like that about you. So thank you so much, man.
Oh man, that's some really high praise, man. Like man, I feel like you could ask me to prom right now and I could say yes. You're really gassing me up over here. I really appreciate the high praise, man. It's always a blast getting to sit down and talk to you because I feel like the beautiful thing about our collaborations are neither of us are afraid to say what we want to say, and it doesn't matter who it pisses off because it's inevitably going to piss someone off, right? Like we're not going to tiptoe around it because we have a thought, and there's nothing wrong with having different thoughts. And for anybody watching this that for some reason is stumbling upon this and has never checked you out, man, you are a fucking breath of fresh air, dude. And it's always a blast to have these chats and communicate. And that's why, you know, we have a couple of things coming up planned, you know, to knock the socks off of whoever's watching. But it's always a blast, man. And I really appreciate you having me on. Absolutely, man. And of course, on the note of being pissed off, let's talk a little bit to the people who may be tuning in at the end, for them to check out our debate that we're having live on March 14th. If you're watching it afterwards, go check it out because I guarantee blood will fly and definitely hit the fan. So go check out Dark Knight Nation. It's going to be on his channel, the debate. Comic book pull list versus trade paperbacks, which is better, and the outcome of that you get to decide. Plus, if I lose
then I actually have to get a pull list myself and do a video on it, and so on and so forth. We have to figure out what if you lose, we don't know.
What's the stakes? Do I shave my head?
Oh,
I'll shave my head.
I don't know. Getting a pull list is hard on me, but that's a little too tough. But
I don't know, because I don't know if we can, like, I don't want to say if I lose I don't get a pull list, because it affects an industry, right, that I'm trying to preserve and love. But if that's something you guys want to see, you know what? Leave a comment down below.
Ooh.
What do you want the stakes to be? So we know if Ryan loses, he opens up a pull list. What happens if I lose? And let's not make it anything negative towards the comic book industry, because obviously having conversations like this is trying to promote a really positive ecosystem for it to survive and thrive. But let me know, what happens if I lose? Maybe the most liked possibility in the comments is what we do.
I like it.
And it could be maybe I shave my head.
Yikes.
We'll see.
I mean, you have now put a weapon in the hands of the general public. So so comment down below, any of you who are watching, tune in on March 14th, and above all else, go check out DarkKnightNation. Dude, thank you so much again. And freaking just always drop by on this channel, man.
Oh, dude. Of course. Same to you, man. Any time of the day, we'll get something moving.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in here today at Beside the Point. Be sure to check out the rest of our videos and comment down below. And until next time, we'll see you again.
We are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in here today at Nerdy Blurb TV and checking out this video. Consider subscribing if you're into this kind of stuff, because we like to keep it nerdy here and interact with cool individuals such as yourself. Have a great day.